Hello, and welcome to the first grade curriculum preview for the fourth 6 weeks. Thank you for joining me. This is obviously the version with the voiceover notes. If you'd prefer to see the slides just with the notes at the bottom of the slide, or if you watch this presentation and want to go back, I just want to let you know that there's just the slide presentation version that's available in the SMORE as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the unit overview access instructions. I just want to remind you how important it is to use the unit overview for your planning for your unit as well as your lesson. I want to remind you too that this is where you can access the pacing guide, clarifiers, as well as find all kinds of time-saving tips and notes about what lessons you can use for particular standards. So if that's something that you need to review, you can pause the video and then just take a look at the instructions on how to access that unit overview in Canvas. Okay, so let's just take a quick view of the upcoming 6 weeks from a district perspective. We have 2 student holidays within the 6 weeks and nothing else on the district viewpoint, so just always like to look at that. We're going to talk about the pacing for Unit 4 and just to remind you that it's linked at the top of the unit overview. So when you get to the unit overview, you can just click the hyperlink that's highlighted right there. And when you do, you will see this pacing guide. So just a one-pager gives us an overview of what this 6 weeks will look like for our first grade. And we've got 3 different mini units, one for 7 class periods, one for 10 and another one for 10, and that's going to be covering 4 different content areas or content standards and then several process skills. So let's take a look at these mini units in a little bit different view. So we have the first mini unit, which is covering weather and air, and that's going to be 7 different classes, and you can see the standards listed out there. So when we talk about weather and air, we're going to be recording weather information. So that means we need to actually go out and observe the weather on a daily basis if possible. We're going to be talking with our first graders about relative temperature, using hot or cold, and then a thermometer. So for instance, we're just looking at a thermometer. If the thermometer the red liquid, which is actually a dyed alcohol, is up high, that's what we might call hot. And then if it's down to towards the bottom or the middle, we consider that to be cold. And just starting to scaffold and make connections between relative temperature and the actual numbers or where we see the thermometer reading. We're also going to be looking up at the clouds to see if it's a clear day with no or little clouds or a cloudy day. Calm or windy, and we're going to be using a windsock, which you're located in the science lab for that, and then if we have any rain or ice. The other content standard that goes along with this spinning unit is 1.8D, which is demonstrating that air is all around us and then observing that wind is moving air, which fits in nicely with this mini unit. And then we've got 2 process skills. Students are going to need to learn how to record and organize their data. And so this can be the weather data with pictures, numbers, or words, and then describing what scientists do. So obviously a really nice tie-in for meteorologists. The second mini unit is 10 classes, and that's talking about objects in the sky. And so students in first grade are going to observe again and describe changes in clouds, the moon, and stars, including the sun. So you can see the moon during the day sometimes, but you definitely will want to talk to parents about taking students out to observe the moon and stars at night if possible. With it getting dark earlier, the kiddos should probably still be able to do that. And again, we're going to bring in those process skills and practice recording and then organizing our data in pictures, numbers, and words, and then describing what scientists do in this particular context. When we talk about the process skills, if you use STEM scopes and AIMS lessons, most of the time those are going to be incorporated into some of the resources there, but I just wanted to have those listed here so you were aware of what those process skills are with these content standards. Okay, and then lastly, we're going to round out with 10 classes talking about seasons and then day and night. And for first grade, we're going to be looking at characteristics of the four seasons and then characteristics of day and night. So that's kind of the overarching theme. And again, we are going to practice recording and organizing our data with pictures, numbers, and words. And then a new process skill is making predictions based on those patterns. So for instance, if we're starting to make observations about the seasons, say for fall, and we notice that in the fall, we see the leaves change and it's quite windy, and some days might be warm and some days might be cold. We can predict that next year we might see the same kind of thing. One of the things that I think is helpful is looking at a vertical alignment between kindergarten and first grade, because we have a real similar vertical alignment between our standards. And I think it's helpful for you to know as a first grade teacher what your kiddos were looking at last year, what we need to spiral back and review, and then how to grow them. So this table shows the major content standards for this particular standard or particular unit, and how those change. So you can kind of pause that and then look at those subtle differences between the two. And then here are the kind of takeaways from that vertical alignment piece. So again, you could pause that and kind of look and see what implications that might have for planning your instruction. So one of the things I wanted to do was just highlight one of the resources that we have in the unit overview. This is an Ames book called Look at the Moon, and it's kind of a long book, and so what I did is I took screenshots of each one of the pages, and this is a little reader that's available with one of the lessons in the unit overview, and I just wanted to show you kind of this resource and talk about how powerful it is when we are looking at in this instance, I'll just in the sky with the moon. So obviously your students, if they're looking at the moon, they're going to be looking at that most of the time at night. Again, it can be out during the day, but you might also be looking at images of the moon maybe at night as a class. When your students go out and observe the moon, it can be in different kinds of views and they might see different things. So I think this book really helps frame some of the different types of situations that they might see the moon in. So you can pause this and kind of look at this book, or you can go to the unit overview and take a look at this book as well. But I just wanted to highlight this is a resource because I think it's really a great one. There are quite a few pages on this, but you could make maybe one class copy of it. You're welcome to go back to the slides in the s'more and take each one of these images and put it in a PowerPoint, and you could maybe show this together as students look through the actual book as well. But there's a couple of different ways to use this. So again, I just wanted to highlight that and make you aware of it. So let me kind of show you where this is in the unit overview. I'm going to go ahead and bring the first grade unit overview for the 4th 6 weeks. And this is down in the resources section, which is a couple of pages into it. Here's the standard we have, and then this is listed under the Ames resources, and it's called Look at the Moon, and this is a long-term observation lesson about the moon. And then you can click on this and you can see the whole lesson as well as the booklet. And then I just wanted to point out too, I'm going to show you this little guide, but every time we have one of these little interactive readers, sometimes I get teachers that say, this is a great little reader. What exactly should I do with this? Or do you have some suggestions of how to use it? So I have made this little quick guide to use these little rubber band books, which can really be used for any of the books that you would want to use with your students. But I just wanted to point out where that was. So you've got this informational text piece here. Let's take a look and see how you might use it. So this is the quick guide to using these rubber band books, and there's lots of them in all of the grade levels, and so you'll see some from different grade levels on here. This is just a little piece about how to assemble them. The one that I just showed you about the moon is actually a full page, so you don't have to fold it or anything. You just print them out and put them together. but I have some ideas here on how to use them in the class. I think the most powerful way to use these booklets is to use them over several days in several different ways. That helps scaffold the instruction, it helps chunk the information for the students, and lets them allow to focus on text features and the text and vocabulary at different times. So this is just an example of how you might use this with your students maybe on the first day, basically previewing the book, looking at the illustrations, not even looking at the text per se, but having some discussion about what they can see just visually. And again, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, so if you'd like to pause this at any time and just read the screen, you're welcome to do that. Then on day 2, I'd pull the books out again and actually now get into the actual text itself. I think you could use any of the strategies that we've rolled out for our Bold Literacy initiative. Each one of those would be great. If you need a copy of those, you can go back to the actual slides in this more, and those are hyperlinked here. And then on day 3, you might want to start focusing on the vocabulary that is in the text. So there's a couple of ideas for using some strategies with that piece as well. So again, any of those strategies that you would use with any sort of informational text would be great. But one of the things I love about AIMS is that they have age-appropriate resources that are spot on with the standard. So you might have a Moon book that you get from the library, but it could be very general or not looking at how it changes over time specifically, but the AIMS resources would be honed in on that. Okay, I also wanted to show you a couple of visuals for some interactive word walls, and my apologies, this is a little fuzzy, but I think you can get the idea of it. This is an image I got from Dr. Julie Jackson's Facebook page. It's called Science Toolkit, and this is where she posts all of the interactive word wall pictures that teachers send in. So I like to look on here and see what I think is good stuff, things I might modify, or just some ideas. I just thought this was neat because we've got some patterns between day and night, and you can see that students have added their examples, which I think is very powerful. I do have a little note on here that you want to make sure that when we include the moon, that we make sure that students know and see the moon can be out during the day and night. Now, obviously, it's harder to see it during the day because the sun is up, or maybe the moonrise time is going to be after school or at a time when the sun is up as well. But I just saw the moon was only on this side on this particular example, and it reminded me that I want to make sure that we hit that misconception with students. We've also got some summary statements here about the 4 seasons. This was an anchor chart idea that I thought that might be helpful. You remember when we were talking about the weather standard and we talked about relative temperature, and when the thermometer is in this position, we call that hot, and when it's in this position, we call that cold. You can go ahead and expose them to the numbers and talk about what those numbers mean, but I thought this anchor chart was really helpful to start for them to understand what that thermometer means. And these are just a couple of visuals to remind you that we do have these tools for you in the science lab. We have windsocks. We have enough for every student to have their own. And then we also have these demonstration thermometers. They might be in the science lab. Your kindergarten classrooms might have them in there, but they're nice and large and they're wooden backed, so they'd be big enough for all of the students to see those if you took that outside. And then just a couple of other literacy connections for this unit. I just wanted to remind you about the Delta Science Readers. These are 2 titles that fit nicely with this unit. And you have the student books, the big books. And then there's also a new lesson that I've put into the unit overview from a new book that you have on campus. It's called Picture Perfect Science Lessons, and I will correlate these into the unit overviews, and they're hyperlinked in there. You have a copy of this physical book in your either science lab or your professional learning library. Your science resource manager is the one that had this book and brought it to the campus, so you can ask them if you can't find it, but the whole lesson is linked in there, and it's really great because it is in the 5E, but it uses picture books as part of the lesson. Okay, and I just want to round up with just a couple of ideas about technology applications if you're looking for expanding that a little bit. If you haven't used kidsweatherreport.com, it's a really great little site. It's friendly for primary students. Doesn't have a whole lot of text, and you can search different weather information from around the world. StoryKit is always great, and ChatterPix is a great connection as well. And then just a reminder about vocabulary. When we talk about vocabulary and interactive word walls, what lists we should be using with our students, I want to remind you that that list should be taken from the standard clarifier. I know lots of teachers like to use the STEM Scopes picture vocabulary, and it has some of the vocabulary, but it doesn't have all the words for the standard. So you'll want to be checking the standard clarifier, and you'll find that list right there. And then just to wrap up, to remind you that you do have an academic coach for science, and that is me, Brenda Swerzinski, and I am happy to help you. If you ever have a question, please do not hesitate to email, call, or if you'd like to set up a time for me to come out and work with you or your team, I'm happy to do that. Thanks so much for joining me, and please let me know what I can do to help support your science program.